The wedding invitation had been sitting on Beatrice Romano's kitchen counter for 3 weeks before she finally RSVP'd yes. And even then, she almost changed her mind 5 times before the actual day arrived. Standing in front of her bedroom mirror now, smoothing down the emerald silk dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, she wondered if this was a mistake. Sarah had been her best friend since college, and missing her wedding was unthinkable, but Beatrice knew there was a strong possibility that Warren Keller would be there. Sarah had mentioned it casually during a phone call 2 months ago, almost too casually, which meant she definitely knew about their history. Beatrice hadn't seen Warren in 7 years. 7 years since they'd ended things in a coffee shop near campus, both of them crying, both of them knowing that their dreams were pulling them in opposite directions. He'd wanted to build something from nothing, to prove himself in the world of commercial real estate development. She'd been accepted into a prestigious graduate program for environmental science across the country. They were 23 and stupid enough to think that love couldn't survive long distance, that wanting different things meant they couldn't want each other. She'd regretted it every day since. The wedding was at a vineyard in Napa Valley, the kind of place that belonged on magazine covers with its rolling hills and perfect rows of grapevines stretching toward the horizon. Beatrice arrived exactly 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, late enough to slip into a seat without much small talk, but early enough to not be rude. She'd perfected this timing over years of attending events where she might run into people from her past. The chairs were arranged in neat rows on the lawn, white fabric billowing gently in the afternoon breeze. Beatrice found a seat in the middle section, not too close to draw attention but not so far back that she'd seem antisocial. She was studying the programs when she felt it, that strange electric awareness that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She looked up, and there he was. Warren Keller stood near the groom's side, hands in the pockets of an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, and for a moment, Beatrice forgot how to breathe. He'd always been handsome in that boy-next-door way, with warm brown eyes and a smile that could light up a room. But the man she was looking at now had grown into something else entirely. His shoulders were broader, his jaw more defined, and there was a confidence in the way he carried himself that hadn't been there before. His dark hair was styled perfectly, and even from this distance, she could see he'd aged like fine wine. Then their eyes met, and the 7 years between them collapsed into nothing. Warren's expression shifted through surprise, recognition, and something else she couldn't quite name before settling into a careful neutral. He nodded once, a small acknowledgement, and she returned it, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she was sure everyone around her could hear it. The ceremony began before either of them could do more than stare. Beatrice tried to focus on Sarah, radiant in her lace gown, and Michael, beaming like he'd won the lottery. She tried to listen to the vows, to feel the romance of the moment, but her eyes kept drifting to where Warren stood among the groomsmen. Every time she looked, she found him already watching her. When Sarah and Michael kissed, and everyone applauded, Beatrice felt tears on her cheeks and wasn't entirely sure they were for the happy couple. The reception was held in a converted barn that had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting everything in a warm golden glow. Long tables were decorated with wildflowers and candles, and a live band was setting up in the corner. Beatrice found her assigned seat, and was relieved to see she was at a table with college friends she actually liked. People who would provide enough buffer and distraction to get through the evening. She made it through cocktail hour by staying in constant motion, chatting with old acquaintances, admiring the venue, keeping one eye always on Warren's location so she could maintain a safe distance. She saw him surrounded by people, shaking hands, laughing at jokes. She overheard someone mention his company, something about a major development deal in Seattle, and filed it away to look up later. Dinner was served, and Beatrice relaxed slightly. She was seated between Lisa, who'd been in their study group, and Tom, who dated Lisa briefly junior year and was now happily married to someone else. The conversation flowed easily, stories from college mixing with updates about careers and kids, and the general chaos of being 30 years old and trying to figure out life. Then came the toasts. Michael's best man went first, telling embarrassing stories that had everyone laughing. Then Warren stood up and the room quieted. He held his champagne glass with an easy grace, and when he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the barn. "I've known Michael since we were 12 years old," he began, and Beatrice was struck by how his voice had deepened, gained resonance. "We met at baseball camp, and he immediately challenged me to a home run contest. I won, but only barely, and he's been my best friend ever since." The crowd chuckled. Warren smiled, but his eyes swept the room and landed on Beatrice for just a fraction of a second before moving on. "Over the years, I've watched Michael chase a lot of dreams. Some he caught, some he didn't. But when he met Sarah 3 years ago, I knew he'd caught the one that mattered most." Warren's expression softened. "Sarah, you've made my best friend happier than I've ever seen him. And Mike, buddy, you better take care of her because she's way too good for you." More laughter. Warren raised his glass. "To Sarah and Michael, may your love be the kind that lasts forever, the kind that survives every challenge, every change, every year that passes, the kind we all dream about." Everyone drank, but Beatrice's hand shook slightly as she brought her glass to her lips. She wondered if she was imagining the weight behind his words, the way they seemed directed at something more than just the happy couple. The band started playing, and Sarah and Michael took to the floor for their first dance. It was beautiful and sweet, and Beatrice clapped along with everyone else. Then the band invited others to join, and suddenly the dance floor filled with couples swaying to a slow cover of an old love song. Beatrice escaped to the bar. She ordered a glass of wine and was waiting for the bartender when a familiar voice beside her said, "Make that 2 glasses of the Cabernet." Her whole body tensed. Warren stood next to her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woody and expensive that definitely hadn't come from a department store. "Hi," she said, because what else was there to say? "Hi, B." The nickname rolled off his tongue like he'd said it yesterday instead of 7 years ago. "You look incredible." "Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself." She accepted her wine glass from the bartender, grateful for something to do with her hands. Warren took his glass but didn't drink, just studied her with those warm brown eyes that had always seen too much. "I wasn't sure you'd be here." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted. "But Sarah's my best friend. I couldn't miss this." "Michael's mine. Same situation." He paused. "They definitely planned this." "Oh, absolutely." Beatrice felt a small smile tug at her lips despite herself. "Sarah was way too casual when she mentioned you might be attending. She's about as subtle as a freight train." Michael kept asking if I'd be bringing a date, which he knows I never do to weddings. Then he'd make these comments about how interesting the guest list was. Warren shook his head, but he was smiling too. "They think they're matchmakers. They already got their happy ending. Now they want everyone else to have one too." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. The band shifted to a new song, something upbeat that had the crowd cheering. "Dance with me," Warren said suddenly. Beatrice's heart jumped. "Warren, just one dance." "For old time's sake." His eyes held hers. "Unless you're afraid." That did it. Beatrice had never backed down from a challenge in her life, especially not from him. "I'm not afraid of anything. I remember." He held out his hand. She took it. The moment their palms touched, electricity shot up her arm. Warren's hand was warm and calloused, the hand of someone who'd worked for everything he had, and it closed around hers with a certainty that made her knees weak. He led her onto the dance floor, and then his arm was around her waist, pulling her close, and they were moving together like no time had passed at all. They'd always been good at this, the physical synchronicity that came from knowing someone's body as well as their mind. Warren led with a confidence that was new, but the way they fit together was achingly familiar. Beatrice rested her hand on his shoulder and tried not to think about all the nights she'd held him, all the mornings she'd woken up in his arms. "So," Warren said after a moment, "environmental science. Did you change the world working on it?" Beatrice was impressed. Her voice came out steady. "I'm a senior consultant for a firm that helps corporations develop sustainable practices. We've worked with some major companies, reduced their carbon footprints significantly. It's not saving the planet overnight, but it's something." "That's incredible, B. I always knew you would do something that mattered. What about you? I heard someone mention Seattle and a development deal." Warren's mouth quirked. "You've been paying attention." "Hard not to when you're the best man and everyone wants to talk to you." "I started a company," he said. "Keller Development Group. We focus on mixed-use properties, residential and commercial spaces designed with sustainability in mind. Green buildings, renewable energy, community spaces. Started small in Portland, but we've expanded over the last few years. The Seattle project is our biggest yet." Beatrice pulled back slightly to look at him. "You're building green developments." "Turns out I was paying attention during all those rants you used to go on about sustainable architecture." His smile was soft. "You made me see things differently, made me want to build things that wouldn't just make money but would actually contribute something positive to the world." Her chest tightened. "Warren, I'm not saying it to make you feel guilty or like you owe me anything," he continued quickly. "I'm just saying that knowing you changed my life, B. Even after we ended things, the impact you had stayed with me." The song ended, bleeding into another, and they kept dancing. Around them, other couples swayed and laughed, but Beatrice was only aware of Warren, the warmth of him, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. "I think about you," she heard herself say. "More than I should. More than is probably healthy." His arm tightened around her waist. "Yeah. I've never stopped wondering what if. What if we'd tried long distance? What if we'd been braver? What if I'd called you after I moved back to California 2 years ago instead of being too proud and too scared?" Warren stopped dancing. They stood in the middle of the floor, other couples moving around them, and he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You've been back in California for 2 years. I got an offer from a firm in San Francisco. I've been there ever since." "I'm in Portland. I know. That's 3 hours by plane, less if you drive and don't hit traffic. I know that too." He cupped her face with his free hand, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Beatrice Romano, are you telling me we've been within driving distance for 2 years and neither of us was brave enough to reach out? Apparently we're both idiots." "Apparently," he laughed, but it was shaky. "God, I've missed you. I've dated other people, tried to move on, but nobody ever came close. Nobody ever made me feel the way you did." "Same," she whispered. "Warren, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I thought we couldn't make it work. Sorry I let you go. Sorry for all the wasted time." "Hey, no, don't do that." He brushed away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. "We were kids. We both thought we needed to choose between love and our dreams. We didn't know we could have both. And now I'm a 30-year-old man who knows exactly what he wants." His eyes searched hers. "I want you, B. I want to take you to dinner and hear about every single day of the last 7 years. I want to drive down to San Francisco every weekend if that's what it takes. I want to figure out how to make this work, because the universe just gave us a second chance, and I'm not stupid enough to waste it." Beatrice felt like her heart might burst. "That's quite a declaration, Keller. I'm a developer. I think big." His smile turned playful. "So what do you say? Will you give us another shot?" She should be cautious. She should take time to think about it, to consider the logistics, to protect her heart. She should do 1,000 sensible things. Instead, she grabbed his lapels and kissed him. Warren made a sound of surprise that turned into a groan as he pulled her flush against him, kissing her back with 7 years of longing. His mouth was exactly as she remembered, soft and demanding and perfect, and Beatrice melted into him like she'd never left. The barn, the wedding, the other guests all faded away until there was only this. Warren's hands in her hair, his heart pounding against hers, the taste of wine and promises on his tongue. Someone whistled. Someone else cheered. They broke apart to find half the wedding guests watching them with delighted grins, including Sarah and Michael, who looked entirely too pleased with themselves. "Looks like our plan worked," Michael called out, and the room erupted in laughter and applause. Warren kept his arms around Beatrice, pressing his forehead to hers. "We're never going to hear the end of this." "Worth it," she murmured, and kissed him again. They spent the rest of the reception attached at the hip, dancing and talking and making up for lost time. Warren introduced her to colleagues and friends, his hand never leaving the small of her back, his pride in her accomplishments obvious in every word. Beatrice met some of his team members from Keller Development Group and was impressed by how they spoke about him, not just as a boss, but as a leader who genuinely cared about his employees and his project's impact. As the evening wore down and guests started leaving, Warren pulled Beatrice outside onto the veranda that overlooked the moonlit vineyard. The air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of grapes and night-blooming flowers. "Come to Portland with me tomorrow," Warren said suddenly. "Stay the weekend. Let me show you my life, my city, what I've built." Beatrice's practical side whispered that this was too fast, too much, but her heart, the part that had been waiting 7 years for this moment, shouted it down. "Okay." His smile was brilliant. Yeah. I have Monday off anyway. I was planning to use it to recover from wedding social exhaustion, but this sounds better. Much better." Warren pulled her close, wrapping his suit jacket around her shoulders when she shivered. "Fair warning, I'm not planning on being a gentleman about this. I'm going to do everything in my power to convince you that we belong together." "I think I'm already convinced," Beatrice admitted, "but I'm definitely not going to stop you from trying." They kissed under the stars while the party wound down inside, and Beatrice felt like she was finally where she was supposed to be. The drive to Portland the next day was filled with conversation that never lagged. They took Warren's car, a sleek black Tesla that he admitted was one of his few indulgences, and talked about everything. Warren told her about starting his company with 2 employees in a cramped office, about the lean years when he'd lived on ramen and hope, about the first big project that had put them on the map. Beatrice shared stories about graduate school, about her research on renewable energy integration, about the satisfaction of helping a major corporation reduce its environmental impact by 40%. "My company did some projects for corporations trying to go green," Warren mentioned as they crossed into Oregon. "We could have used someone like you on the consulting side, would have made the whole process smoother." "You still could," Beatrice said carefully. "I mean, if this works out, maybe there's potential for collaboration. My firm works with clients all over the West Coast. Warren glanced at her, his expression warm. I like how you're thinking about the future. Hard not to when the present is this good. His apartment was in Portland's Pearl District, a converted industrial building that had been transformed into modern lofts. Warren's unit was on the top floor, all exposed brick and massive windows that flooded the space with natural light. The furniture was masculine but not overly so. Comfortable leather sofas mixed with warm wood and splashes of color. Beatrice noticed environmental design books on the shelves, architecture magazines on the coffee table, and photographs of projects he'd clearly worked on. "This is beautiful," she said, moving to the windows that overlooked the city. "You can see the river from here. One of the reasons I chose this place." Warren came up behind her, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I wanted to be in the middle of things but still have this view to remind me why I do what I do. Cities can be beautiful and sustainable if we build them right." She turned to face him. "You really listened to me, didn't you? All those nights I'd go on about green architecture and sustainable development, you actually heard me." "I heard everything you ever said to me, B." His voice was serious. "You were the smartest person I knew and you cared about things that mattered. How could I not listen?" Beatrice kissed him, slow and deep, pouring 7 years of regret and hope and love into it. Warren responded in kind, his hands sliding into her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss. They stood there in his living room, the city spread out behind them, and Beatrice felt something slot into place inside her chest, like a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing had finally returned. "Show me your city," she murmured against his lips. "Show me everything." And he did. Warren took her to his favorite coffee shop, a little place in the Alberta Arts District run by a woman who remembered everyone's order and greeted Warren like family. They walked through Forest Park, hiking trails that wound through towering Douglas firs, while Warren pointed out different neighborhoods visible through the trees, explaining his vision for how Portland could grow while preserving its natural beauty. They visited one of his completed projects, a mixed-use development in the southeast that featured ground-floor retail, apartments above, and a community garden on the roof. Solar panels covered available surfaces, rainwater collection systems fed the gardens, and the whole complex was built with reclaimed and sustainable materials. "This is incredible," Beatrice said, genuinely awed as they stood in the rooftop garden. Residents were tending plots of vegetables and herbs, kids were playing in a designated area, and she could see how the design fostered community. "This is exactly the kind of thing I've been advocating for in my consulting work. Spaces that bring people together while treading lightly on the environment." Warren looked pleased. "We have 3 more like this in development right now. The Seattle project is similar but on a much larger scale. Whole city blocks reimagined as green space integrated with living and working areas. That must require massive funding." "It does." He led her to a bench, and they sat overlooking the garden. "I'm not going to pretend I haven't done well, B. The company's been very successful. We've attracted investors who believe in sustainable development, and we've proven it can be profitable. I'm comfortable financially." Beatrice studied his face. "How comfortable?" "Comfortable enough that money isn't something I worry about anymore." He met her eyes. "I don't want that to be weird between us." "Is there a reason it would be?" "Some people get strange when they find out. I'm still the same guy you knew in college, just with a better bank account." Beatrice took his hand. "Warren, I fell in love with you when you were a broke college student with big dreams and a beat-up Honda. If anything, I'm impressed that you've built something meaningful with your success instead of just hoarding wealth. You're in love with me." His voice was soft. She froze, realizing what she'd said. But looking at him, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, she couldn't take it back, didn't want to. "Yes," she said simply. "I never stopped, Warren. Even when I tried to move on, even when I thought I'd never see you again, I loved you. I've loved you since we were 22 years old, and finding you again feels like coming home." Warren pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she felt him trembling. "I love you too. God, B, I love you so much. I've been trying to play it cool, not scare you off by being too intense too fast, but screw it. I'm in love with you. I want this us to be real and permanent and everything we didn't let it be the first time." They kissed in the garden while around them life continued. People tending their vegetables and kids laughing, the city humming below. And Beatrice thought that this, right here, was what happiness felt like. That night, Warren made dinner in his apartment, cooking pasta from scratch while Beatrice sat on the counter and drank wine and watched him move around the kitchen with easy confidence. He told her about learning to cook during the lean years, how he'd realized that eating out for every meal was draining his startup capital, and taught himself to make decent food on a budget. "Now I actually enjoy it," he said, stirring sauce. "It's meditative, you know. After a long day of dealing with contractors and permits and investors, coming home and just focusing on creating something with my hands helps me decompress." "You were always good with your hands," Beatrice said, then laughed at his raised eyebrow. "I meant woodworking, you pervert. Remember that bookshelf you built me sophomore year? I remember you crying when I gave it to you. It was the sweetest thing anyone had ever done for me." She traced the rim of her wine glass. "I still have it, actually. It's in my apartment in San Francisco, holding all my favorite books." Warren turned from the stove, his expression tender. "You kept it?" "Of course I did. Warren, I kept everything that reminded me of you. Photos, letters, that ridiculous stuffed bear you won for me at the carnival. I couldn't let go, even though I thought I was supposed to." He crossed to her, stepping between her knees, his hands settling on her hips. "We were so stupid. So young and so stupid," she agreed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "But we're not anymore. We know what we want now." "And what do you want, Beatrice Romano?" She kissed him softly. "You. This. A chance to build something real that doesn't involve either of us sacrificing our dreams. Then that's what we'll do." He kissed her again, deeper, and Beatrice felt heat curl through her body. "Fair warning, the pasta's going to take another 20 minutes. "Whatever shall we do with 20 minutes? She tugged at his collar, pulling him closer. Warren groaned. "You're going to kill me." What a way to go. They made out like teenagers in his kitchen, hands wandering, breath coming fast, until the timer went off and they broke apart laughing. Warren finished cooking while Beatrice set the table, and they ate dinner like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Conversation flowing easily, comfortable silences punctuated by shared looks and secret smiles. After dinner, they curled up on his sofa with more wine and talked about logistics. It was practical and necessary, but also intimate in its way. The vulnerability of laying out their lives and figuring out how to merge them. San Francisco to Portland is about a 10-hour drive or an hour-and-a-half flight, Warren said, his fingers drawing patterns on Beatrice's shoulder. "Doable for weekends, but not ideal long-term." "My job has some flexibility," Beatrice offered. "I travel to clients all over the West Coast anyway. I could potentially relocate to Portland, or at least split my time. My firm has offices in several cities." "I don't want you to give up anything for me." "I'm not. I'm choosing us, which is different." She shifted to look at him. "But Warren, we need to be smart about this. We can't just rush into combining our lives without thinking it through." "Agreed. But we also can't let fear or logistics talk us out of something we both want." "So what do you propose?" Warren was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We date. Really date, not just fall back into what we had before. We alternate weekends, you come here or I come to San Francisco. We video call during the week, stay connected. In 6 months, we reassess and figure out next steps." "That sounds reasonable." Beatrice nestled closer. "Though I have a feeling we're both going to want to accelerate that timeline." "Probably," he admitted with a soft laugh. "I've already wasted 7 years without you. 6 months feels like forever." They spent that night tangled together in Warren's bed, alternating between making love and talking until dawn. Beatrice learned about his parents, who divorced when he was young but who were both incredibly proud of what he'd built. Warren learned about her mother's health scare 2 years ago that had prompted Beatrice's move back to California, about how grateful she was that her mom had fully recovered. They shared scars and secrets and dreams for the future, rebuilding the foundation of intimacy they'd once had while creating something new and more mature. The weekend flew by too quickly. Sunday evening arrived with the weight of impending separation, and Beatrice found herself fighting tears as she packed her small overnight bag. "Hey," Warren said, pulling her into his arms. "This isn't goodbye. You're coming back next weekend, remember? And I'll be in San Francisco the weekend after that. I know, I'm just being stupid." "You're not stupid. You feel things deeply, always have. It's one of the things I love about you." He tipped her chin up. "We're going to make this work, Bea, I promise." She kissed him fiercely. "You better keep that promise, Keller." The drive back to San Francisco was lonely despite the music and podcasts Beatrice tried to distract herself with. But when she pulled into her apartment complex and checked her phone, there was already a text from Warren waiting. "Miss you already. Call me when you're home safe," she called immediately, and they talked while she unpacked and got ready for bed. It was mundane and perfect, the kind of everyday intimacy she'd been craving for years. The next 6 weeks fell into a pattern. Beatrice threw herself into her work during the week, consulting with clients on sustainability initiatives, and loving the challenge of changing corporate minds about environmental responsibility. But weekends were for Warren. They alternated cities, and each visit brought them closer. Their lives slowly weaving together. In Portland, Warren introduced her to his business partner, Marcus, a sharp-minded architect who'd been with him since the beginning. Marcus took one look at Beatrice and Warren together and declared them disgustingly cute, but Beatrice could see the genuine happiness in his eyes that his friend had found someone. "He's been a mess for years," Marcus told her over drinks while Warren was in the bathroom. "Dating but never serious, always comparing everyone to some mystery woman from his past. I'm guessing that was you, probably," Beatrice admitted. "Well, thank God you came back. He's been insufferable since the wedding, all smiles and whistling. It's creepy." Beatrice laughed. "I'll try to keep him only moderately happy." Too late. He's a goner. In San Francisco, Warren met Beatrice's colleagues and friends, charming everyone without trying. Her best friend from work, Jennifer, pulled Beatrice aside at a dinner party and stage whispered, "Where did you find him, and are there more?" "Unique model, sorry," Beatrice said, watching Warren across the room as he discussed green building materials with Jennifer's architect husband. Her chest felt warm, full. "He's one of a kind, and completely in love with you. The way he looks at you, Bea, it's like you hung the moon." Beatrice had noticed. Warren had never been good at hiding his feelings, and now he didn't even try. He looked at her like she was precious, like he couldn't quite believe she was real and in his life. It made her feel beautiful and cherished and braver than she'd ever been. 2 months in, Warren's Seattle project hit a snag. Environmental impact assessments came back requiring significant design changes, And suddenly, his team was working around the clock to revise plans and satisfy regulatory requirements. Beatrice could hear the stress in his voice during their nightly calls, the exhaustion. "I'm coming up," she announced Thursday evening. "I'll work from your apartment Friday, be there when you get home." "B, you don't have to do that. I know you have that big presentation next week, which is exactly why I can work remotely tomorrow. I need to focus on prep anyway, and I can do that anywhere with Wi-Fi. Let me help, Warren. Let me be there for you." He was quiet for a long moment. "Okay, yeah, that would be really nice." She drove up Thursday night, arriving at his apartment close to midnight. Warren was still at the office, but he'd given her a key weeks ago, an unspoken declaration of trust and commitment. Beatrice let herself in, unpacked, and was making tea when she heard the door open. Warren looked exhausted, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up, but his whole face brightened when he saw her. "You're here." "I'm here." She crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Hi." He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. "God, I needed this, needed you." They stood in the entryway for a long time, just holding each other. Beatrice could feel the tension slowly leaving Warren's body, his breathing evening out. "Come on," she said eventually, taking his hand. "When's the last time you ate a real meal? Define real." "Anything that isn't from a vending machine or delivered in a bag." Warren thought about it. "Tuesday." "That's what I thought. Sit, I'm making you food." She'd stopped at a grocery store on the way and stocked his fridge. And now she made him a proper dinner while he sat at the kitchen counter and told her about the project. Beatrice listened, asking questions, and found herself making suggestions based on her own work with environmental compliance. "Wait," Warren said, sitting up straighter. "Say that again about the carbon offset integration. If you designate part of the development for urban forest, high-density native plantings that maximize carbon sequestration, you can potentially offset some of the construction impact. It might help with the regulators if you can show that the finished project will actually improve air quality compared to current conditions." Warren grabbed his phone, typing notes. "That's brilliant. Why didn't our environmental consultant suggest that?" "They probably aren't thinking creatively enough. A lot of traditional consultants just focus on meeting minimum requirements, not exceeding them." Beatrice plated his food and set it in front of him. "I could look at the assessments if you want. No charge, just me helping you out. You do that." "Warren, I love you. Of course I'd help you solve a problem in my area of expertise." He stood up, came around the counter, and kissed her thoroughly. "I love you too, so damn much." Beatrice spent Friday reviewing Warren's environmental reports and making detailed notes. When his team got her suggestions that evening, she fielded a video call with Warren, Marcus, and their environmental consultant, talking through her ideas. By the end of the call, they had a revised approach that everyone felt good about, and Warren looked at her like she just handed him the moon. "You're incredible," he said after the call ended. "I'm serious about bringing you in as a consultant on this officially, not because you're my girlfriend, but because you just solved in one day what we've been struggling with for 2 weeks. My firm would love the project," Beatrice admitted. "It's exactly the kind of work we specialize in." "Then let's make it happen. Send me your company's information, I'll reach out Monday." And just like that, their professional lives intertwined with their personal ones. Beatrice's firm was hired to consult on the Seattle project, and while she wasn't the lead to avoid any appearance of impropriety, she worked closely with the team. It meant more time in Portland, more opportunities to see Warren, and more proof that they could successfully balance work and relationship. 3 months in, Warren had to fly to Denver for a development conference. "Come with me," he said while packing. "Make a long weekend of it." We can explore the city, do the tourist thing. I've never been to Denver. Me neither, not properly. I've been here for conferences but never had time to actually see anything. Come with me, B. She checked her calendar. She had client calls scheduled but nothing that couldn't be rescheduled. Okay, yes. Let's do it. Denver was beautiful, the mountains visible from downtown, the air crisp and clean. Warren's conference was Thursday and Friday, so Beatrice explored the city while he attended sessions and networked, then joined him for evening receptions. She met developers and architects and city planners from across the country and found herself drawn into conversations about sustainability and green building practices. Your girlfriend knows her stuff, one developer from Austin told Warren. We should talk about bringing her firm in on our next project. Warren beamed with pride. She's the best in the business. Saturday and Sunday, they played tourist. They hiked in the foothills, visited museums, ate at restaurants recommended by locals. It felt like a real vacation, stolen time where they could just be together without the pressures of work or logistics. Sunday evening, walking back to their hotel after dinner, Warren pulled Beatrice into a small park. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and the city lights were just starting to twinkle on. I want to talk about the future, Warren said, his hands holding hers. Our future. Beatrice's heart skipped. Okay. These last 3 months have been the happiest of my life. Getting to know you again, falling deeper in love with you every day, it's everything I didn't know I needed. And I don't want to keep living in 2 cities, seeing you only on weekends. Warren, let me finish. He took a breath. I'm not proposing, not yet, though God knows I want to, but I'm asking you to move in with me. My apartment, or we find a new place together, I don't care. Portland or San Francisco or somewhere in between. I just want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every night. Tears blurred Beatrice's vision. She'd been thinking the same thing for weeks now, wanting more than just weekend visits and video calls. I want that too, she said. Warren, I've been miserable every Sunday when we have to say goodbye. I want to build a real life with you. His smile was brilliant. Yeah, but we have to be practical about it. My job, your company, we need to figure out the details. We will, together. He pulled her close, kissing her softly. I'm thinking Portland makes the most sense. My company headquarters is there, and your firm has an office there. You'd have to transfer, but you mentioned they're always looking for senior consultants in that location. They are, Beatrice confirmed. She'd actually already checked, had already had a preliminary conversation with her boss about the possibility. I could make it work. Would probably mean a slight pay cut initially, but the Portland office is growing fast. I don't want you to take a pay cut because of me. I'm not. I'm making a choice about where I want my life to be, and you're a big part of that, but it's also about the opportunities in Portland. The city's growing, companies are relocating there, there's huge potential for sustainability consulting. It actually makes sense career-wise, not just romantically. Warren traced her cheekbone. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, you just were too smitten to notice, still am. He kissed her again. So we're doing this. You're moving to Portland? I'm moving to Portland. Beatrice felt giddy, terrified, absolutely certain. Let's find a place together. Something that's ours, not just yours or mine. A house, Warren said immediately. With a yard, maybe space for a garden, room to grow. Room to grow, Beatrice echoed, and they both knew they were talking about more than just square footage. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Beatrice formally requested a transfer, which her firm approved enthusiastically. The Portland office was thrilled to be getting someone with her experience and client relationships. She gave notice on her San Francisco apartment and started the process of packing up her life. Warren flew down every weekend to help, and they hunted in Portland via video tours and virtual walkthroughs. They found a craftsman-style house in Laurelhurst, a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and beautiful period homes. It needed some updating, but it had good bones, a big backyard, and a front porch perfect for morning coffee. "This one," Beatrice said, staring at her laptop screen during a video tour. "Warren, this is it." He looked at the same images on his phone and grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that. I already called the realtor. We can see it in person this weekend." They made an offer the day after viewing it in person, walking through the empty rooms and already picturing their furniture, their life together. The offer was accepted within 24 hours, and suddenly they were homeowners together, building something permanent. Beatrice's last day in San Francisco was bittersweet. She'd made good friends, built a solid reputation, loved the city. But as she loaded the last box into the moving truck and started the drive north to Portland, to Warren, to their house and their future, she felt nothing but excitement. Warren met her at the house, and they spent that first night sleeping on an air mattress in the empty living room, eating takeout pizza and planning renovations. "I want to redo the kitchen," Beatrice said, gesturing with a slice of pizza. "Make it more open to the dining room, update the appliances to energy-efficient models. The master bathroom needs work," Warren added. "And we should convert that back bedroom into an office for you, somewhere you can take client calls and work from home when you need to." They talked late into the night, making plans, dreaming together. And when they finally fell asleep tangled together on the air mattress, Beatrice felt more at home than she'd ever felt anywhere. The next few months were controlled chaos. They renovated the house, combining Warren's furniture with Beatrice's, creating a space that felt like both of them. Beatrice started her new position at the Portland office and immediately proved invaluable, bringing in new clients and expanding the firm's presence in the Pacific Northwest. Warren's Seattle project broke ground, and Beatrice's firm continued consulting on the environmental aspects. They fell into routines. Morning runs together through Laurelhurst Park, Warren cooking dinner while Beatrice made salads and set the table. Weekends exploring Portland and the surrounding areas, hiking in the gorge or driving to the coast. Hosting dinner parties for their combined friend groups, watching their separate lives fully merge into one shared existence. 6 months after Beatrice moved to Portland, Warren's parents came to visit. His mother, Patricia, was warm and enthusiastic, immediately pulling Beatrice into a hug and declaring that she was thrilled Warren had finally found someone. His father, William, was more reserved but clearly proud of what his son had built, both professionally and personally. "He talks about you constantly," Patricia told Beatrice while the men were outside grilling. "The way he lights up when he says your name, it reminds me of how his father used to look at me, back before things got complicated." "Warren mentioned you and William divorced," Beatrice said carefully. "We did, and it was the right choice for both of us. But that doesn't mean what we had wasn't real or good for a long time." Patricia smiled. "I see that same potential in you too, but with better communication and more maturity. You're going to make each other very happy." That evening, after Warren's parents had gone back to their hotel, Warren pulled Beatrice into his arms on their front porch. The neighborhood was quiet, stars visible despite the city lights, and everything felt peaceful. "Thank you," he said softly, "for being so wonderful with my parents. I know my dad can be intense and my mom asks too many questions. They're lovely. They clearly love you so much. They do, and they love you too, I could tell." Warren kissed her temple. "My mom asked me if I was planning to propose soon." Beatrice's heart jumped. "What did you tell her?" that I was waiting for the right moment. He shifted, and suddenly he was pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. But being here with you, after the day we just had, watching you fit perfectly into my family and my life, I realized the right moment is now. Warren. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. He opened the box, revealing a stunning engagement ring, an emerald-cut diamond set in platinum with smaller stones along the band. Beatrice Romano, I have loved you for 8 years, even when we were apart, even when I thought I'd never get another chance. You are my best friend, my partner, the person who makes me want to be better every single day. Will you marry me? Will you build this whole crazy, beautiful life with me? Yes, Beatrice was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. Yes, Warren, of course yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly, catching the porch light and sparkling. Then he was kissing her and they were both laughing and crying, giddy with joy and possibility. They called their families that night, both sets of parents thrilled. Sarah and Michael, when they heard, claimed full credit for the engagement, reminding Warren and Beatrice that none of this would have happened without their wedding. You're not wrong, Warren admitted during the video call. So thank you for inviting us both, for not being subtle, for giving us another chance. That's what friends are for, Sarah said, beaming. Also, I'm going to need to be involved in every aspect of wedding planning because I've been waiting for this moment since college. The wedding planning was actually fun, mostly because Warren was surprisingly invested and had opinions about everything. They decided on a venue quickly, choosing a restored barn in the wine country outside Portland, similar to where they'd reunited but uniquely theirs. They wanted something intimate, just family and close friends, a celebration of love that felt authentic. 8 months after the engagement, on a perfect June evening with the sun setting golden over the vineyard and mountains in the distance, Beatrice walked down the aisle toward Warren. He wore a midnight blue suit, and his eyes were wet with tears as he watched her approach. She wore a simple but elegant gown, and her heart felt like it might burst with happiness. They'd written their own vows. Warren went first, his voice steady despite his emotions. Beatrice, 8 years ago I fell in love with a girl who challenged me, inspired me, and made me believe I could change the world. 7 years ago I made the biggest mistake of my life by letting you go. But somehow, impossibly, the universe gave us a second chance. You are my best friend, my partner in everything, the love of my life. I promise to support your dreams as fiercely as you support mine. I promise to build green cities and a green future with you. I promise to love you through every challenge, every change, every adventure that comes our way. You are my home, B, and I'm so grateful I get to spend the rest of my life with you. Beatrice was crying, but she smiled through the tears as she said her own vows. Warren, you have been the constant in my heart since I was 22 years old. Even when we were apart, you were the standard I measured everyone against, the dream I couldn't let go of. You listened when I talked about my passions. You took my ideas seriously. You built something meaningful because you cared about making the world better. You are kind and driven and so incredibly loving. I promise to be your partner in business and in life. I promise to laugh with you, dream with you, and fight for us every single day. I promise to love you completely, Warren Keller, for all the days I have. Thank you for waiting for me, for finding me again, for being exactly who you are. They exchanged rings, and when the officiant pronounced them married, Warren pulled Beatrice into a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a promise of everything to come. Their guests cheered and Beatrice laughed against Warren's mouth, absolutely giddy with joy. The reception was perfect. They danced under string lights, ate incredible food, and celebrated with everyone they loved. Warren's best man toast made everyone cry, and Sarah's maid of honor speech had the entire room laughing. When Warren and Beatrice cut their cake, and he gently dotted frosting on her nose instead of smashing it, she fell in love with him all over again. Late in the evening they snuck away from the reception, walking through the vineyard hand in hand, needing a moment alone. "Hello, Mrs. Keller," Warren said, pulling her close. "I'm keeping Romano professionally," Beatrice reminded him, "but I like the sound of that anyway." "Me too." He kissed her softly. "Happy, deliriously, you, more than I ever thought possible." Warren rested his forehead against hers. "We did it, B. We got our second chance and we didn't waste it. Best decision I ever made, saying yes to you." "Second best," he corrected. "Best decision was showing up to that wedding. Sarah's going to be insufferable about being right. Let her. I'll happily admit she was right about everything if it means I get you." They kissed under the stars, the sound of their wedding reception a distant celebration, and Beatrice thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. How you could lose someone and find them again. How love could wait patiently for years. How the right person at the right time could change everything. 1 year later, Beatrice was working from her home office when Warren came home early from a site visit, peeking his head in with an excited expression. "Busy?" he asked. "Just finishing up some notes." "What's up?" Warren came in, sat on the edge of her desk. "Remember that interview I did last month for Architectural Digest, about sustainable development and green building practices? Of course. You were nervous about it for a week. The article comes out next month and they want to do a follow-up piece about us, about how we've combined our careers and expertise. They're calling us a power couple in sustainable development." Beatrice laughed. "That's ridiculous and also kind of amazing. It gets better." The profile generated interest from a major investor who wants to fund a new project, an entire planned community built on sustainable principles. Carbon neutral, renewable energy, integrated green spaces, the works. And they want both Keller Development Group and your firm to lead the project. "Warren, that's incredible." Beatrice stood, moving into his arms. "That's the kind of project we've both been dreaming about." "I know." He was grinning. "It would be years of work, huge commitment, but B, we could actually build the kind of community we've always talked about. Prove that sustainable living can be beautiful and profitable and accessible." "Where would it be?" "Outside Portland, about 45 minutes. Close enough to commute, but far enough to really build something from scratch." Beatrice's mind was already racing with possibilities. "We'd need to involve urban planners, environmental scientists, community organizers. This has to be built with input from people who'll actually live there." "Exactly what I was thinking." Warren cupped her face. "So we're doing this, taking on the most ambitious project of our careers together." "Absolutely." She kissed him. "We're a good team, Keller." "The best team," he agreed. 2 years into their marriage, the planned community project was well underway and Beatrice and Warren were happier than ever. They'd settled into married life beautifully, supporting each other through stressful work periods and celebrating successes together. The house in Laurelhurst had become a real home, filled with laughter and love, and the life they'd built together. One evening in early spring, Beatrice made dinner while Warren set the table, and she realized she needed to tell him something she'd been keeping secret for a week. "I have news," she said as they sat down to eat. Warren looked up, immediately attentive. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news." "Really good news?" She took a breath, suddenly nervous. "I'm pregnant." Warren froze, fork halfway to his mouth. "What?" "I'm pregnant. About 8 weeks. I found out last week, but I wanted to wait until after the first doctor's appointment to tell you, make sure everything was okay." He set his fork down carefully, like he didn't trust his hands. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. Warren's face went through about a dozen expressions before landing on pure joy. He stood up, came around the table and pulled Beatrice to her feet, holding her carefully like she was made of glass. "We're having a baby," he repeated, and then he was laughing and crying at the same time. "Oh my God, Bea, we're going to be parents. Are you happy?" she asked, even though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy, I'm over the moon. I'm terrified and excited and so in love with you I can barely think straight." He placed a hand carefully on her still flat stomach. "There's a person in there, a tiny person we made together." "I know." "Crazy, right?" Warren kissed her soft and reverent. "We're going to be such good parents. You think so? I know so. You're the smartest, kindest, most capable person I know, and you're going to be an amazing mother. And I'm going to do everything in my power to be the kind of father this kid deserves." They talked late into the night about names and nurseries and how their lives were about to change. Warren was already making plans to finish the planned community project before the baby came, determined to be present and available for those crucial early months. Beatrice talked about her firm's parental leave policy and how she'd balance work and motherhood. "We'll figure it out together," Warren said, his hand still resting on her stomach like he couldn't quite believe it was real. "Just like we've figured out everything else." 7 months later, on a crisp October morning, Beatrice went into labor. Warren was a nervous wreck during the drive to the hospital, holding her hand and breathing through contractions with her like they'd practiced in birthing class. 14 hours later, exhausted and overwhelmed and completely in love, they welcomed their daughter into the world. She was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and Warren's brown eyes, and when the nurse placed her in Beatrice's arms, time seemed to stop. "Hello, sweet girl," Beatrice whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We've been waiting for you." Warren sat on the bed beside them, his arm around Beatrice, staring at their daughter with wonder. "She's perfect. Bea, we made a perfect person. What should we name her?" They'd been debating for months, unable to agree. Warren traced a finger along their daughter's tiny hand, which immediately gripped it with surprising strength. "Hope. I want to name her Hope." Beatrice looked at him, seeing the emotion in his eyes, understanding what he meant. Hope for the future, hope for the world they were trying to build, hope that their love story would continue through this tiny person and beyond. "Hope Keller," she said, testing it out. "I love it. Hope Keller it is." Warren kissed his daughter's forehead, then Beatrice's. "Thank you. For her, for us, for this whole beautiful life." "Right back at you," Beatrice murmured, exhausted and happy. The first few months of parenthood were challenging in ways they hadn't anticipated. Late nights and endless diaper changes and learning a tiny person's cries and cues. But they tackled it together, supporting each other through the exhaustion and frustration, celebrating every small milestone. Warren took 3 months of paternity leave, something his company's board had pushed back on until he'd reminded them that as CEO and majority owner, he could set whatever policies he wanted. He wanted to model work-life balance, to show that successful men could prioritize family. Beatrice went back to work part-time after 4 months, but her firm was flexible, allowing her to work from home and adjust her schedule around Hope's needs. They hired a nanny for the hours when both of them had to be in offices or on job sites, but they prioritized being present as much as possible. When Hope was 6 months old, the planned community project held its grand opening. The first phase was complete, 50 homes sold to families who valued sustainability and community, and the response was overwhelming. National media covered it, praising the innovative design and the model for future development. Warren and Beatrice stood at the community center they designed as the heart of the development, Hope strapped to Beatrice's chest in a carrier and watched families explore their new neighborhood. "We did this," Beatrice said softly. "We actually pulled it off. We did." Warren wrapped an arm around her waist, careful not to jostle Hope. "And this is just the beginning. This model, if it proves successful, could be replicated across the country. We might actually change how people think about sustainable living. One community at a time," Beatrice agreed. That evening, after Hope was asleep in her nursery and they'd collapsed on their couch with well-deserved glasses of wine, Warren pulled Beatrice close. "I've been thinking," he said, running his fingers through her hair. "About that wedding, Sarah and Michael's, where we reconnected." "What about it? If someone had told me that night that in 4 years I'd be married to you with a beautiful daughter and we'd have just opened the most innovative, sustainable community in the Pacific Northwest, I wouldn't have believed them. It would have seemed too perfect, too much like a fairy tale." Beatrice smiled, remembering that night, the shock of seeing him again, the kiss on the dance floor. "But here we are." "Here we are," Warren echoed. "And B, I just want you to know that every single day I'm grateful. For that wedding, for our second chance, for every choice that led us here. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and this life we've built together is beyond anything I ever dreamed." "I love you," Beatrice said simply, because what else was there to say? "Warren Keller, I love you so much it sometimes scares me." "Don't be scared," he kissed her softly. "We've got this. We've got each other, we've got hope, we've got all these dreams we're making real. The future is ours, B, and it's going to be amazing." She kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it. Love and gratitude and hope for all the years ahead. Outside, Portland twinkled in the darkness, and inside their home in Laurelhurst, their daughter slept peacefully. And Beatrice thought about second chances and true love and how sometimes the universe conspired to give you exactly what you needed at exactly the right time. Years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work and love. Hope grew into a curious, bright little girl who loved helping in the garden and asking endless questions about why things worked the way they did. Warren's company continued to grow, taking on more sustainable projects across the country. Beatrice became a senior partner at her firm, leading their West Coast operations and speaking at conferences about corporate environmental responsibility. When Hope was 3, they found out Beatrice was pregnant again, this time with twin boys. Warren cried when they saw the ultrasound, overwhelmed by joy and terror in equal measure. 3 kids, he said, staring at the images. "We're going to have 3 kids, B. I know, we're either brave or crazy." "Both," he decided. "Definitely both." The twins, James and Robert, arrived healthy and loud, turning their household into controlled chaos. But they managed, supporting each other through sleepless nights and the juggling act of 3 children and 2 demanding careers. Warren cut back his work hours, promoting Marcus to co-CEO and delegating more. Beatrice structured her role to allow maximum flexibility. They moved to a bigger house when Hope turned 5, finding a beautiful property with enough bedrooms for everyone and a huge backyard where the kids could play. It needed work, but Warren loved that, loved the process of renovating and updating and making it theirs. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Warren planned a surprise trip for just the 2 of them, his parents watching the kids for a long weekend. He flew Beatrice to Napa Valley, to the same vineyard where they'd reconnected at Sarah and Michael's wedding. "Thought we should come back to where it all started again," he said as they walked through the vineyard at sunset, the hills golden around them. "Seemed appropriate for 10 years. "It's perfect," Beatrice said, overwhelmed by the romance of it. "Warren, this whole decade with you has been the happiest of my life. Mine too." He stopped walking, pulled her close. "Thank you for taking a chance on us at that wedding. Thank you for moving to Portland, for marrying me, for giving me 3 incredible children and a partnership I treasure more than anything. Thank you for being exactly who you are." "I'd do it all again," Beatrice said honestly. "Every single choice, every sacrifice, every challenge. It's all been worth it for us." They kissed as the sun set, and Beatrice remembered standing in almost this exact spot 11 years ago, dancing with Warren for the first time in 7 years, believing in second chances. She'd had no idea then what their life would become, how deep their love would grow, how much joy was waiting for them, but she knew now, and it was better than any fairy tale. That night, lying in bed in the Vineyard's guest cottage, Warren pulled out his phone and showed Beatrice something he'd been working on. "I've been thinking about the future of Keller development," he said. "About legacy and what we want to leave behind. And I've decided to create a foundation, funded by the company's profits, dedicated to making sustainable housing accessible to lower-income families. No more green communities, only for people who can afford it. Everyone deserves to live somewhere beautiful and environmentally responsible." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "Warren, that's incredible. I want you to help run it. Your firm could consult, but I'm thinking bigger. I want you as co-founder, co-director. This should be something we build together like everything else." "Yes," she said immediately. "Absolutely yes." They talked for hours about the foundation, about projects they could fund, about changing the narrative around sustainable living. And Beatrice marveled at the man she'd married, who'd taken the success he'd built and was turning it into something that would help countless families. 15 years after their wedding, with Hope in middle school and the twins in elementary, Beatrice and Warren stood at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for their foundation's first project. A 100-unit affordable housing development built to the highest environmental standards. Families who'd been struggling to find safe, affordable places to live were moving into beautiful apartments with solar power, community gardens, and playgrounds. "This is what it's all about," Warren said, watching kids play on the new equipment. "Not just building things, but building community, building hope, building a better future." "We're doing it," Beatrice said, squeezing his hand. "We're actually making a difference." That evening, at home with their kids, Hope asked a question that made both Warren and Beatrice pause. "How did you two meet?" their daughter asked over dinner. "Like, what's your love story?" Warren looked at Beatrice, a smile playing on his lips. "Well, we met in college, fell in love, and then made a really stupid decision to break up." "Warren," Beatrice laughed, "it's true. We thought we had to choose between our dreams and each other. Took us 7 years to figure out we could have both." "So how did you get back together?" James asked, always eager for details. "We ran into each other at a friend's wedding," Beatrice explained. "Your dad was standing there in a suit, looking handsome, and it was like no time had passed at all. We danced, we talked, and we realized we'd been given a second chance. And we didn't waste it," Warren added, reaching across the table to take Beatrice's hand. "We chose each other, chose to build a life together, and it's been the best decision I ever made." "That's romantic," Hope said with the dramatic appreciation of a 12-year-old. "Are you glad you broke up the first time?" Beatrice thought about it. "I'm not glad we broke up. Those 7 years apart were hard, and I missed your dad every day. But I think we needed that time to grow up, to figure out who we were separately before we could be together successfully. When we reconnected, we were ready for each other in a way we probably weren't at 23. Plus," Warren added with a grin, "if we hadn't broken up, we might never have appreciated how good we have it now. Sometimes you have to lose something to understand its value." That night, after the kids were in bed, Warren found Beatrice in their bedroom, looking at old photos from Sarah and Michael's wedding. There they were, dancing, looking at each other with wonder and hope. "We were so young," Beatrice said. "We were," Warren agreed, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "But we knew what we wanted even then. Each other." "Each other," he confirmed, pressing a kiss to her neck. "And now we have all of this. The kids, the houses, the careers, the foundation, the life we built together. It's more than I ever dreamed, B." She turned in his arms, studying the face she'd loved for over 2 decades. There were lines around his eyes now, gray threaded through his hair, but he was still the same man she'd fallen for in college, just better, deeper, more himself. "I love you," she said. "Warren Keller, I love you more now than I did that night at the wedding, more than I did on our wedding day, more with every year that passes." "I love you too," he said. "Forever, B, you and me forever." And standing there in their bedroom, in the house they'd made a home, with their children sleeping down the hall and a whole future still ahead of them, Beatrice believed it. Believed in forever, believed in second chances, believed that sometimes love was worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth building an entire life around. 20 years after reuniting at that wedding, Warren and Beatrice celebrated their 19th anniversary surrounded by family and friends at their home. Hope was in college now, studying environmental engineering and following in her parents' footsteps. The twins were teenagers, all gangly limbs and big ideas. And Beatrice and Warren were still madly in love, still partners in everything, still grateful every day for that night at the vineyard when they'd found each other again. Speech. Sarah called out, she and Michael having driven up from California for the celebration. "We need a speech from the couple who proved that second chances are real." Warren stood, pulling Beatrice up with him, and addressed their gathered loved ones. 19 years ago, I married my best friend, the love of my life, the person who makes me want to be better every single day. But our story actually started 28 years ago, when a girl with fierce green eyes and strong opinions about environmental responsibility sat next to me in Economics 101 and called my first comment in class naive. Everyone laughed. Beatrice rolled her eyes fondly. "We fell in love, broke up, spent 7 miserable years apart, and then got incredibly lucky," Warren continued. "Sarah and Michael got married, invited us both, and gave us a second chance at this incredible thing. So this anniversary isn't just celebrating 19 years of marriage. It's celebrating 28 years of knowing Beatrice, 20 years since we reconnected, and every single day in between that led us here." He turned to Beatrice, his eyes shining. "You are my greatest adventure, my biggest success, my favorite person. Here's to 19 more years, and then 19 after that, and however many more we get. I love you, B." "I love you too," she said, kissing him while everyone cheered. "Always and forever." And as the party continued around them, music playing and loved ones celebrating, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The reunion at the wedding that had changed everything, the risk they'd taken on each other, the life they'd built piece by piece. It hadn't always been easy, balancing careers and family and individual dreams with their partnership. But it had always been worth it. They'd built a life that mattered, created a family full of love, changed their industry for the better, and through it all, they'd had each other. That night at the vineyard when Warren had asked her to dance had been the beginning of everything. And standing here now, decades later, Beatrice knew that choosing to take his hand had been the best decision of her life. Some love stories have perfect timing from the start. Others need time to breathe, to grow, to find their way back to each other. Warren and Beatrice's was the latter, a love that had survived separation and doubt and years of wondering what if. But when they'd been given their second chance, they'd grabbed it with both hands and never let go. That was the thing about true love. Beatrice thought as she watched Warren dance with their daughter while the twins raided the dessert table. It didn't give up. It waited, it hoped, it found its way home. And when it finally did, it was absolutely worth the wait. Their love story had started at a wedding, reconnected at another wedding, and had grown into something lasting and true. And every day, in small moments and grand gestures, they proved that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that give you a second chance to get it right. Forever was a long time, but with Warren by her side, Beatrice knew they'd make every moment count.